Hello, welcome to Fans of Fandom. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Wesselman, psychologist, professor, and full-time nerd. On this show, I have deep dive conversations with cool people about things that we're fans of. If you're joining us, chances are you're a fan too. Welcome aboard. This series is called Inside the Cosplay. I'm a fan of cosplay, specifically cosplayers. For some, it's a hobby. Then there are those for whom it's a profession. And for others, it's a way of life. Now, regardless of their motivation, I love watching cosplayers do their thing. Their passion, their dedication, their creativity. They're wearing their fandom. So in this series, I'm going to feature some of the cool cosplay folks I've worked with in the con world. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Elle of La Vie Cosplay. Elle is an entertainer, podcaster, and of course, cosplayer. I've worked with Elle on panels, both for QuadCon and ReggieCon, discussing the psychosocial dynamics of fandom and cosplay. Elle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right in. Elle, why don't you give us your cosplay origin story?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So I've been doing this for a really, really long time. I'm almost at 25 years of cosplay. So it's been a long road. I started in 1999, back when this was new and unknown to the majority of the masses, and now it has evolved into this pop culture phenomenon that it is today. I am the host of the podcast Shenanigans Cosplayers Say with my cosplay partner Ash. It is a cosplay comedy podcast where we just kind of cover different areas of the cosplay community. So we've got everywhere from competing episodes to social, cultural, to psychosocial. You name it, we've probably covered it at this point. You've joined us before, so you know how it rolls. But as far as currently, La Vie Cosplay is celebrating 10 years this year. So we've been around for 10 years. Ash and I have been working together since about 2013. We do a lot of entertainment-related content for conventions around the country. We are also competitive cosplayers. We have competed both nationally and internationally. We've represented the United States in Spain last year. And right now we are deep in contracts for fall. So our next appearance will be at Planet FunkCon, where I believe I will be seeing you there.
Indeed, yes, yeah. And I look forward to hearing about your future events as well when you are allowed to say what those are.
Yes, that's always the hard part, is you have to wait till they let you. So we're in the process for a very busy fall.
Excellent. Well, until then, we will shiver in anticipation. What was it that initially attracted you to cosplay?
So my first cosplay was actually done on Halloween, which is very common. It's very common for that to be kind of the way that it started. I've always been a theater kid. So the concept of cosplay was immediately appealing. But my friend and I in high school realized that conventions existed. Because back in the early 2000s, really the only ones in the area that existed were Anime Iowa and Anime Central. So we went to Anime Iowa in like 2000. And well, we went to Anime Central first, and then we went to Anime Iowa in 2000. We made some friends at Anime Central, and then ended up performing our first skit and won Best in Show. So, and then it just kind of stuck. The competition bug stuck, and it didn't really wear off after that. So it's kind of, now it's more like a flexible version of theater, if you will. Because when you try to do a play and you're an adult that works a full-time job, those rehearsals aren't always convenient. So now it's kind of like a more flexible form of theater for me.
Okay, yeah. Now there's various ways of cosplaying, right? One can just put on costume and just walk around, right? One can go full out and do skits and compete like you did. There's sometimes organic things that happen. I've seen pictures where people will meet random other con goer who happens to be sharing a themed costume, and they'll quickly enact some sort of sketch, right? So why do you think so many people, I guess, enjoy cosplay as performance? Like, where's the synergy there?
So, cosplay as performance is a way for a lot of people to kind of explore the world around them, to explore themselves.
Mhm.
For some people, it's an escape from their daily life to allow them
Mhm.
to be someone else. A lot of it is the community that comes from cosplaying from a fandom that you like. It automatically introduces you to people with like interests, and that
Mhm.
comfort level can be very nice for people who particularly do not feel like they fit in our everyday world, our neurotypical world, so to speak, since cosplay tends to be very appealing to the neurodivergent community.
Mhm.
And that is part of the reason is because you're going to walk into a space where you know you're more likely to be accepted for who you are. You're
Mhm.
in a space that you already know there are people with like interests, like abilities. They're going to understand what you're talking about. And then you don't feel that need to conform as much in that
Mhm.
environment. So I feel like that piece of community is what's really appealing to the majority. There's a
Mhm.
lot of us that then are also like, yes, I love performing, or yes, I love competing. But we like competing a lot of the times because of the people that we've met.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
like cosplaying because of the people that we've met. Ash and I met because of a cosplay group that we both ended up in.
Mhm.
So, I think for a lot of people, it's that sense of belonging and community that they don't get in another environment.
Yeah, so belonging is something that I've studied quite a lot. And it's one of those sort of core human needs. And sort of what I'm hearing is that fan spaces generally, but certainly in the case of cosplay, this provides almost a safe space to be able to, because you've got to some degree that value,
Hmm.
right? The people are valuing you for your interest, for who you are, for your expression, and uh, yeah. So I think that's really cool. I find it one of the things I keyed on about your discussion of competition and the people that you've met, right? They're still belonging there as well. The term competition can often be used negatively, right?
Yes.
And I suppose it varies upon the space, right? um, I imagine maybe there are occasional fist fights, perhaps, at certain cosplay competitions, but probably not as much as you see in sports culture.
I mean, you never know. You don't have audience members getting in fist fights, at least typically for cosplay competitions. The conflict is normally between competitors, but yes. So yeah, it depends on the person. Obviously, you're gonna have your people who don't have great sportsmanship, who get cranky because they didn't win. I mean, that's the name of the game. But I have found that the higher level of competition you're in, the more camaraderie there is. The more like we want to build a relationship and friendships. People are more professional. People are very excited to talk about what they did and how they did this technique and that technique. So not only do you like learn a ton from being in the green room at a competition, you also are likely to make a lot of friends. That is where I've made most of my friends have been competing against them in a cosplay competition. And that's I mean that's how we know the majority of people that we know. And that's really what typically makes that experience worth doing. Because if you're just going in for awards, you're eventually going to be disappointed. I mean, if that's the only reason to go, then competing goes from being fun to being really frustrating. And we've been in that spot before where we've been the like, well, the only reason to go to this competition is to win. And then even when you win, it doesn't feel great because of all the frustration on your way there. You know, it just, you focus too much on winning, it becomes really overwhelming. In my
Tell me a
experience.
little bit more about the frustrations that you're talking about there. Is it just
Yeah.
like the travel, or is it the entire process?
Well, I find that the process is more frustrating when things aren't going right if the only reason you're doing it is because you want to win an award.
Hmm.
Because then you get overwhelmed when you make a mistake. And then it's like, oh no, I made this mistake, now I won't win. Oh
Hmm.
no, I did this wrong, now I won't win. Oh no, this isn't going to be done the exact way I wanted to, now I won't win. It's a
I see.
lot of pressure. And we used to put that kind
Right.
of pressure on ourselves in the past. And
Mhm.
we've, you know, after doing some of these higher level competitions, we've kind of released that a little bit and have gone, you know, nope, we need to find competitions that have other value.
Uh-huh.
And it does make it more worth it in the end, even if you don't end up winning anything.
I appreciate the use of the term value there, right? Because I mean, people have different values, and they don't have to be either or. They can be both and. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, it is okay to want to win. Like,
mhm.
of course, we still want to win. Like you're in a competition, you want
Right.
to win. It's
Mhm.
not okay to be like mean to people, but it is okay to want to win. Like that's totally fine. I will never pretend that we don't want to win. Like, of course we do. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna sit here and be like, we only do this for fun. No, of course we want to win. Like, it's a competition.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know.
but if that's the only extrinsic motivator, right?
Mm-hmm.
By definition, only one person can, or one team can win, right? So it's almost like
Absolutely.
someone who's going into that space, the odds are already against you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and you kind of
So,
hit it on the head that that's an extrinsic motivator. So if you're
mm,
going in with no intrinsic motivators,
mhm,
things tend to become far more stressful. They tend to not stick as well. It tends to not have the meaning that you want it to have because you don't have that
mhm,
internal drive
mhm,
for it because you're focusing on something that is coming from outside of you. So if your focus is just, I want that trophy, like
mhm,
it may not be the experience that you want when it's all over. So.
mhm. So in your particular, the way that you cosplay, right? You create your costumes, right? You plan your sketches, you act them out, so that it is a really long, complex process. So do you find, like, how do you experience the process? Do you lose yourself in it? Flow state, what some psychologists have called it.
I guess the group flow, right?
Yes, yeah.
We just talked about that in our last episode. It we I'm kind of in a new state of cosplay right now. Where we were finding that our more recent process was very stressful.
Mm, mhm,
You know, we were trying to do too much. Um, you know, life is busy. Lots of changes have happened. As you know, we have an executive producer.
indeed.
Ash has a toddler, which has changed a lot of our the way in which we need to do things. So, what we were finding was the previous process of trying to do so many competitions and so many things, and being like, we're picking this competition and then we're going to do it for this competition, added a lot of stress to the
Mm,
process,
mhm,
and started to create that kind of that frustration of, well, now I've spent so much time. This has been so annoying. I've given up so many things. If I don't win, I'm going to be mad.
mhm,
And that's not healthy. Like, that's not good for you. So,
mhm.
right now, we're trying the process of first you make the costume, then you pick the contest. We're going to
Mm,
see if we can do it. We've never been good at this process. But trying to make it, then compete. But we've also started doing a lot more purchase costumes and assembled costumes so that we are still able to cosplay characters that we want to without this financial and time stress of having to literally make everything.
mhm,
And that
mhm,
has helped a lot with balancing out, like, we want to do all these other fun things like perform and do photo shoots, but we don't have time to make everything.
Right.
So that's been kind of a nice addition.
Hmm.
It kind of let us flex a little bit.
So it's like I'm hearing recognizing that there is a diversity and expression of cosplay, not just across individuals, but perhaps in one's self, right?
Yes,
One can one can
you can do
cosplay,
all the ways of cosplay.
right?
We used to
So, but
feel very obligated to make our costumes
Mhm.
because we were being booked as judges a lot, and so we felt very everything we wear has to be made. Everything anybody sees us in has to be made, and it doesn't have to work like that. Like, it's okay. Like, you can wear a costume you didn't make. If somebody wants to judge you for that, well, that's their problem, not yours. Like,
Are you talking generally or specifically when you are serving as judges?
I think either, honestly.
Okay.
I don't, the con picked you for a reason. I don't necessarily feel like a judge needs to show up in like their international costume to judge you. Like, they were picked for a reason.
Right.
It, we don't judge in costume because we feel like it's horribly distracting to contestants.
Right.
Um, I we did it once, and the feedback we got was they were so intimidated because we were in these like big costumes that the con asked us to wear. And they
Ah,
wanted us in it while we were judging, not just like during the contest. Um, and so we kind of took that feedback and went, oh, okay, well, we're not going to do that anymore, because it tends to intimidate the newer cosplayers, because then they're like, oh no, they know how to do all these things, and it distracts them from like what they need to do. And the point of the judging room isn't us, it's about them. Like,
right.
it's not about the judges at all. It's about your
Mhm.
contestants. We do the same thing with emceeing. We don't MC in anything super flashy because we don't want to distract from the people who are performing, the people who are supposed to be on stage. We're there to support them. It's not our show. So even if we're in cosplay, we're not in something super distracting. I mean,
Yeah.
I get why cons want you to come on during the show in something you made.
Uh,
And we do typically try to do that. But if they
mhm.
don't give you enough time to get into your fancy costume, and you got to wear something, I mean,
Right.
it's all
Yeah.
balance, you
Mhm.
know?
No, but that's a really fascinating point to chew on, this idea of you are the facilitators, judges as facilitators or stewards, right? Not because the way that you're describing, the judges who are forced to, if you will, required to wear the flashy costumes, right? Y'all paid your dues, you got there for a reason,
Mhm.
as you noted, right? You've won things,
Yep.
and so you are providing that implicitly, either for the audience, well, for the audience and for the contestants, that comparison effect,
Yes.
right? Which when we look at performance anxiety, things like that too, that is going to add to this idea of, wow, I'm not at that level. And are they thinking of me that I should be?
Yeah.
That's just, you know, all that anxiety is just going to take away from one's being performing their best.
Absolutely. Because yeah, we're there to work for the contestants. Like,
Mhm.
it's not our show.
Mhm.
So as the judge, you're there to support them. You're there to make sure that you've like looked at their entire costume. You've given them the attention that they deserve. That's hard to do in a big cumbersome costume.
Mm.
It's hard to get up and look close at a costume and really like be able to, you don't want to be adjusting your costume while you're trying to give this contestant the attention that they deserve.
Mhm.
So we always advocate for don't make us do it during judging. You want us to do
Mm.
it like during the show. Make sure you give us enough time to change, and we're more than happy to do it.
Right.
But we like to make sure that the focus is on the contestants. And as you said, we don't want to increase that performance anxiety because
Mhm.
there's a lot of performance anxiety during judging. Even
Mhm.
I get it still, and it's been 25 years because you've worked hard, you're excited, you want to talk to them about what you made, but you only have 2.5 minutes. So, so you need to be concise and you need to be direct, and it's a lot of pressure. So we don't want to add to that.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier that I want to come back to before I forget it, you talked about a shift in thinking from now you're making the costume and then choosing the outlet, the
Mm-hmm.
competition, whereas before it was the other way around, almost top down,
Mm-hmm.
right? Tell me a little bit more about what you meant by like your process going through that. Why did you structure it that way.
I think the original process simply comes from you either go to a con or you hear about a contest, you get really excited about it, and then you're like, I want to do that contest. So we're going to make something for that contest, and we're going to plan to go to that contest. The other problem is we both have ADHD, and if we don't have a due date, nothing gets done. So, so the conventions were used as our due date. However, a lot of times it may not have been either the most reasonable amount of time to do it. Things would get in the way. You end up con crunching, which is also not healthy. And it just creates a lot more stress around the project.
Mm-hmm.
So although it's been weird to try to create and then pick a competition, and like we have competitions in mind, just right now we're not saying we're going in this year.
Gotcha.
Like it's, well, if this is done, this would be really good for this con.
Okay.
You know, or it's like, okay, well, I halfway finished this costume. This costume would be really good for this contest, so I'm going to try to finish it by that date. But it's already halfway done.
Okay.
So like I'm not starting it from scratch. So it's like, okay, I think I can do this. But we also need to learn that if the costume's not done, we don't sign up for the competition. And that's our other new rule, is if they are not like 75% done, we don't sign up.
Gotcha.
We just don't do it because it's not worth it. Because the other difficult part for us is not only are we crafting costumes, we're crafting a performance. So
Right.
It's double the work.
Yeah.
So it's a long process. Ash and I live an hour apart from each other, so rehearsals are not easy. Luckily, we have been performing so long that our group flow is super in sync. And you can throw us on a stage and we'll be fine. Like,
Right.
like in general, you just throw us on a stage, we're going to be fine. We'll make something up. But when we want like nicely curated performances, it's nice to have time to rehearse. So having, you know, a better span of time for if it can go wrong is kind of what we're trying to do now. So
yeah, if we look at like just expertise generally, right? Like when I talk to my students about, you know, mini lecture here, social cognition and or just talk cognition generally, people talk about, you know, controlled versus automatic thought processes. And you know, I go to the students, I'm like, how many of you were in a sport, or how many of you played an instrument, or did anything that you got good at and you had to practice the smaller bits? Why, you know, why do you drill? Those things that are difficult become easier and they become more automatic the more you do it. And so when things go wrong and you're well practiced, you know how to pivot much easier, just individually. And then when you have someone you practiced a lot with, you know each other's strengths and weaknesses. You know, my friend, colleague and chair Scott Jordan, who we've worked with before, he will often refer to these things as good jazz, right? I mean, so much of it involves improv, but you gotta find your folks who you know you can have good jazz with.
Absolutely. Yes, I like that. Good jazz. I like that phrase as a previous jazz band child of high school days.
There you go. What did you play?
Trumpet.
Ah, nice. I was a euphonium and then later tuba player, so never got involved in jazz, but certainly was in the band culture. I preferred pep band over everything else.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yep, that was a good one too.
Pivot slightly to let's talk about some of your specific cosplay projects. What are just a couple, because I know you've done many. What are a couple that are very specialty that you like to highlight?
We've done so many. We've made so many costumes.
And so I'm not making you pick one.
Well, I mean, the one that always comes to mind is our international set that we took to Spain. So we did Magi Labyrinth of Magic for internationals. We did Judar and Kogoku Ren. That was by far our most complex performance. And, you know, that one's always going to sit there because it's like the one we took to internationals. It's just like, that's, you know, that's the big one. Harley sticks out for me too. I did Harley, No Flutter's design of Harley Quinn. That was the first costume I patterned and made 100% by myself.
Wow.
So it actually wasn't that long ago. I was still afraid of sewing because I was afraid I would do it wrong. So it was like, I can't do this as good as Ash. I'm not as fast as Ash. I don't I don't have the math brain to just pattern things. Like I'm good at wigs, I'm good at details, I'm good at like crafting and like sculpting and like all of those areas, but sewing has always been really hard for me. It's still very hard for me. I hate it. I hate sewing. I'll be perfectly honest. It's a necessary evil. And she was the first one that I made 100% no help. Just did not have any help. Did all the patterns. So she kind of sticks out for me as like the way that I got over that insecurity that I had, and now I do all of my own sewing. I mean, Ash does not do it for me anymore. She's very pleased about that. Now, sometimes I have to do stuff for her because we flipped, and now I'm out of grad school, but she has a toddler. So, the time, like the ability of time has flipped. So now sometimes I do more things than she does. But I think Harley kind of sticks out because she was kind of that big thing for me. And then I'm working on Oogie Boogie still. So I have started Sunset Dragons Oogie Boogie about a year ago or so. And she's been my first step into doing more like practical special effects type work. And I've realized that that's super enjoyable. She's much more sculptural. Like, yes, there's sewing involved, but it's really not sewing, you know. I have to sew pieces together, but it's not sewing. I mean, we're not drafting major complex patterns and all of that kind of stuff. All her seams are purposely a hot mess because she's falling apart. Like, but there's a lot of distressing and detailing, and a lot of my past theater type, like set kind of work came in for her. So she's been kind of a fun exploration in like another type of costuming to work on with those more like practical special effects kind of work. So I'm hoping to have her done soon. We'll see.
Tell me a little bit more about that. You use the term sculpting practical effects. What specific parts of the costume fall under that label?
So she's very organically shaped.
Okay.
Oogie Boogie is a giant sack.
Right.
And so this costume is very similar. The dress, the base that you start with like a giant sack, but I custom dyed the fabric. I custom painted the fabric. I had to tear things apart, distress it, and then seal the distressing so that it doesn't fall apart. She's got rips and tears that show glow in the dark bugs. And so I used like fabric and layering to create depth to actually make it look like it goes back in with the bugs. And the bugs do not require electronics. Nothing on her does, which is the fun part. She has some of these fun little things. I have to do some airbrushing for like bodysuit and things to get some of the different tones that she's got. I got to learn how to do latex molds, which I haven't done yet, for her bugs that need to go on like my face and the arms that need to like curve. Because I actually took Halloween bugs and repainted them and refinished them because I needed like hundreds and I was not making that. That seems silly. Within reason. But she's just got a lot of fun techniques, and it was nice not to have to focus so much on tailored, really like technical sewing and just be able to kind of put her together and focus on all the other things. That's just been kind of freeing after needing to focus really heavily on very technical sewing for so long.
Well, so you noted, for example, Oogie Boogie, like the original character, right, is just big animated sack.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And so in some of the pictures that I've seen for your earlier versions, right, you were taking some liberties is not quite the right word, but you're sort of doing your own take, right? It's almost like a cover song, if you will.
That's
that
a
you're
good way to put it.
Yeah.
So in the cosplay community, they're called original designs. This one is based off of the design by an artist called Sunset Dragon. But it is very common in the cosplay community to take characters, particularly characters that don't have a human form, and give them one. I'm working on Gengar right now from Pokemon. So it's my first personal original design that I'm doing myself. I have more purple fabric than I know what to do with, and I was like, I need to do a stash project and get rid of this stuff, so I'm going to make Gengar. I think it's my first costume I've actually made without the intention of putting it in a contest, which has also been really interesting. It's very much like, what am I going to do with this when I'm done? But it doesn't matter. Like, I don't have to compete in this. This is weird. I don't know what to do with it. Uh, but it is very common in the community to do designs off of characters that exist, to try to bring to life some of these characters that might be harder to cosplay. Sometimes people will do things like do a female version of a male character. I'm working on that right now. I'm working on Steed from our Flag Means Death. So I'm working on a more feminine version of Steve. Or Steed. Steve. I just watched that episode where they keep calling him Steve. So
Gotcha.
but it's actually pretty common for cosplayers to do their own take on characters, to create their own characters and bring those out into the convention scene as well. They're just not as common in competition. They're hard to judge against a recreation, so a lot of competitions don't allow them.
I see. Yeah, because I feel like I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there would, even when you're trying to do recreations as accurate as possible, there still probably has to be some sort of give and take of something that works better for one's skill set or one's body type or execution of, if you're performing, right? I would anticipate that some structures and costumes look great when they're animated, but do not actually conform to physics at all.
Yes. You can make changes that make sense given for your body type, your physicality, if you have a disability, if it makes more sense to do something XYZ way, like you can do that. It's usually you have to explain why you made the choice. Just so they know, especially if it's like an obvious change. You just kind of have to say, I made this choice because of this. My Beryl costume is a good example. Beryl's from Sailor Moon. It's this purple gown. The gown's supposed to be one piece. I am straight up and down like a stick. And Beryl's very curvy, and this dress was not going to look right unless we made it in two pieces so that I could better accentuate fake hips. And we just explained it to the judges and they had no problem with it. Like, it was fine. Because for me, that was going to be the better way to do this dress, because otherwise it just looked awful. And I'm like, I want to wear something that looks terrible. So you could make changes. I make changes all the time for physical need. I have a joint condition, so I have to make a lot of changes. Shoes are a big one that I usually have to change, because I can't walk in bad shoes anymore. I'm also 38, so I mean, let's be honest, my back hurts, my knees hurt, everything hurts. So you're allowed to make those changes for your comfort and your need, and a good judge should not be like faulting you for that.
Yeah. We've talked about some of your favorite costumes. Is there a costume or two that you would like to, and it sounds like revisiting is part of the process.
Yes.
Is there one that there are some that you either like to very much revisit because you're like, wow, I know so much more now?
Yes. I am in the process with one of those right now. I am slowly redoing Hinoto from X 1999. I did her originally probably in about 2001. I have photos of it, which is what makes me really happy about it, because I'll be able to put them next to each other. So I'm slowly but surely working on Hinoto. She gets tiring because she is all sewing. So it's flat felt seams for days.
Right.
But I think it will be really interesting to put the costume from 2001 and the costume from whenever I get her done next to each other, just to see like the drastic difference between the two costumes. I've always loved her. That anime is one of my favorites, always has been. So even though she's incredibly impractical to wear,
a lot of fabric.
She's like 30 yards of fabric. She's completely impractical to wear. I was like, this is one of those where if I was going to ever redo a costume, this was going to be the one that I was going to redo. So we're going to eventually get her done. It's just, I needed a break from her for a bit. So it's a lot of sewing. I'm just kind of tired of sewing for a bit.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, you can do it now, but you still don't like it.
Right,
And
exactly. It's yeah, I don't like sewing. I really don't. If I could like snap my fingers and the sewing parts could be done, I would be really happy. But that's not how this works if you're competing. So
sort of going back to some of the things you pointed out earlier, the concept of sort of healthy balance, if you will, right? It's okay to have extrinsic motivation,
Mhm.
but you can have multiple motivations, and if it's not enjoyable for you, right? Any of us, right? We can
Right.
certainly expand this to most of our certainly our hobbies.
Mhm.
That and maybe perhaps if one is fortunate enough to have a job they love, right? You can extend it there too. Is that there's an ebb and a flow,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there are papers that I work on, and I reach a point where I'm like, okay, I really need to take a break from this, and I'm not enjoying it anymore. So why am I doing it if I'm not enjoying it? If I have the privilege to be able to switch, not everybody has that, right? More, so I always try to be mindful about that too.
Mhm.
Um, what are some? And I know you have many hats metaphorically, right? And you have expertise in occupational therapy,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
What first of all, what is occupational therapy? And then how do you see these areas, occupational therapy and cosplay,
Mhm.
intersecting?
Right. So yes, most people have no idea what I do. And they think that I get you jobs. It's not what I do. It's not. I'm not a therapist that helps you get a job. So what an occupational therapist does is we help our clients do the things they need to do or they want to do in life in a way that is tailored to them. So, my job is to assist people in occupational participation. So, that may be activities you have to do every day, like getting dressed, brush your teeth, prepare a meal. It might be sometimes we help with like work related tasks. It could be leisure, like hobbies, developing hobbies, socialization, and a lot of times we work with executive dysfunction. So my specialty area is working with, I'm in pediatrics, so I work primarily with children who have ADHD or autism on executive dysfunction, emotional regulation, and sensory processing. Because sensory processing is one of the main focuses of OT, where we work on helping you be able to process the sensory information that you take in from your environment, because those that, particularly for people with autism, it's very difficult to process sensory information. And so a large base of my clients are coming to have help with how do they function and organize their life. How do I adapt to a world that's not made for me? Because the world is made for neurotypical individuals, not for neurodivergent individuals. And so finding that balance, I also work with families to help find that balance as well. Since all my treatment is neurodivergent affirming, my goal is to have the family and the child find a middle ground and not expect the child to do all the changing,
Mhm.
because we can't expect our neurodivergent individuals to change and become neurotypical. That's not really reasonable. So we work a lot on helping the family understand the child and then finding that middle ground. Keeps me busy.
Yeah, yeah. um, where where do you think the skills that one develops in cosplay could be useful here?
Oh, so many. Um, so we do work with kids on coordination and fine motor. So there's a lot of coordination and fine motor involved in crafting.
Mhm.
So that is a task that could be used to promote that. Um, leisure, developing leisure skills. Developing leisure skills is particularly important for individuals who have like depression,
Mm.
anxiety, just having like more things to do, things that they can do. For our kids that are really stuck online, having
Mhm.
something like cosplay can be helpful if you're making things and doing things off of the computer. Um, I've used it literally to teach executive functioning,
Mhm.
because you have to plan and organize and adapt and make a goal, and you have to regulate yourself and not get mad and throw your project across the room. And so I've actually literally with some teenagers, we've been like, okay, we're going to make a cosplay and we're going to go through all the steps and we're going to make our plan. And when our plan doesn't work, how are we going to fix it? And what's reasonable in our budget for our cosplay? So it can teach a lot of those base skills,
Mhm.
because it is best to teach those skills first in something that the child wants to do, and then try to apply those skills to things they don't want to do, like homework. So if
Mhm.
you just start with homework, you're never going to know what their like full capability is. So it's
Mhm.
great to start with something they want to do, like cosplay, and then kind of like move it that way. But hobbies are important for your overall health and well-being. So being able to help kids nurture that is great, because that can also lead to socialization
Mhm.
and in-person socialization, which I have found for my clients is extremely difficult. They're so used to being online now
Mhm.
that enticing them to try in-person social
Mhm.
opportunities is hard.
Mhm.
But when you can go in a costume,
Mhm.
you know you're going to meet people that like what you like because they're also in that costume. It
Mhm.
takes some of that anxiety away and some
Mhm.
of that stress. So it's a really nice bridge into like coming back into a real life social circle.
Mhm. So you've been in this community a while, and in various different ways. We've talked a little bit about the strengths throughout our
Mm-hmm.
conversation, in terms of both psychosocial as well as other domains. Where are some areas that you feel like the community still has room for growth? Where would you like to see it go in the next 10 years?
I would like to see cosplayers putting less pressure on themselves.
Mhm.
The rise of social media has completely changed the community. The rise of the professional cosplayer has completely changed the community. It has now become like when I was a kid, the big thing was I want to be an actor. Now it's
Mhm.
I want to be a professional cosplayer. A lot changed over the pandemic. A lot of people lost their, regular jobs and were able to take that time and become a professional cosplayer. And now you're seeing a lot of young cosplayers being like, that's what I want to do. And
Mhm.
they are so heavily focused on their TikTok numbers and their Instagram numbers, and if they're putting out enough videos, and if they have enough content, and if they have enough, costumes. And, when they go to compete, they're so anxious about if they're doing it perfectly, if they're doing it correctly. And I would love to see less stress over this. I don't know that that's necessarily possible.
Mhm.
The way in which social media impacts community and society in general
Mhm.
is a very hard thing to change, and I don't know that
Mhm.
it will. Um,
Mhm.
that's very ingrained now, but it's become very heavily ingrained within our community. And
Mhm.
people get very nervous when they don't have the numbers and they don't have this and they don't have that.
Mhm.
And I would love to see less stress and more fun,
Mhm.
for particularly for our newcomers.
Mhm.
They don't, I would like them to not feel like you have to monetize this. Like you don't have to.
Mhm.
Um, you know, you can have fun with it. It's not a requirement to have hundreds of thousands of people on TikTok.
Mhm.
Like if you want to do TikToks, that's awesome, but you don't have to do two a day or whatever you think the algorithm wants. Like
Mhm.
it's okay.
Mhm.
And just because you don't have that doesn't mean you're not going to do great things. We don't have numbers. So like we have 1600 followers on Instagram. We do not have numbers, but we guest at cons all the time. Like
Mhm.
don't panic about the numbers. It's okay. I try to
Yeah.
tell myself that too, though, because I get caught up in it too. I'm not above this. It
Mhm.
happens. I still get caught up. I'll look at a video and go, why did that not stick?
Mhm.
But it's good to remind yourself that, like, there's more to this than the social media numbers.
Yeah, I see I see threads weaving through our conversation, right? Coming back into that, when one makes something their job, right?
Mhm.
In case of a professional cosplayer, then that does change the calculus a little bit, right?
Oh yeah.
Extrinsic motivation is not bad. And when we're talking about jobs, well, we need money to eat.
Mhm.
We need, and then uh, as one's life changes, executive producers, showing up, grad school, all of these things influence the way that we exist in the world and the pressures that we experience. So it is, yeah, if you're doing something for money, then it becomes less fun.
Mhm.
I jokingly say at work that I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I'm very privileged to have a job at a place that lets me do what I want.
Mhm.
And I can, my problem, for example, is that most of my hobbies become my work because I figure out ways, my special interest zooms in. Exactly.
We it happens, finding that balance is very we're in that process right now of, the balance of, finding that we don't intend for this to become our full-time job. We're not going to try to do because we know that that's not reasonable for us. And
Mhm,
there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a professional cosplayer. There's
mhm,
absolutely nothing
right.
wrong with that. We have friends who are professional cosplayers. It is
Mhm,
so much work.
right.
Like these they work so hard. So so
Mhm,
so so hard. Like it is wild how hard they work. It is, but you lose the fun when you try to make it too much like work. So, I just it'd be great if some of it would just the kids could chill for a bit. It'd be good,
yeah.
you know.
And social media, I know you and I have talked about this in other
Mhm.
contexts as well, but social media it's curated.
Absolutely.
So I think that's particularly difficult for younger generations who have grown up with this and don't know. And I'm not going to pretend like I have good boundaries, but I try uh, to keep some things back, right? And I've talked to some younger generations who are like, well, a lot of what I put are the positives online.
Mhm.
If there's some negatives in my life or some frustrating things, I keep them off. Uh, My social media is not my full on diary.
Right,
um,
exactly.
and so I think for folks maybe who think of social media more in that way, it would be easy to look at all of the positives that people are curating and assume their lives are all amazing. Mine is always less than, and not recognizing that it's
Mhm.
a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. And we try to be more honest on the podcast than anywhere else about how some of our experience have gone. We have an episode where we've talked about past guesting and how it's not, the sunshines and rainbows that everybody thinks it is. It's not show up in a costume and walk around all day. Like it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of expectations. Cons have big expectations. There's a lot to do. Um, and we try to be a little bit more honest because it's good to have both sides of things, for our especially for our incoming generation who wants to do everything.
Yeah, knowing what one is getting into. And I think of the
Mhm.
same way with when I'm coaching younger graduate students, and I will tell the horror stories as well, and and I will usually say I'm not doing this necessarily to scare you, but
Right.
I'm doing this so that you know what you're getting into. Like this is part of
Absolutely.
it.
Well,
So.
yeah, it's like we want you to understand that like this is the process. These are the things that people go through.
Mhm,
Um, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. It's a lot of work.
mhm.
Uh, but that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Right.
Like, I definitely don't tell anyone that, like, if that's really what you want to do, like, go for it, but understand, like, what it actually is. Because a lot of professional
Mhm,
cosplayers have, it's not, their business isn't actually cosplaying, it's a lot of other things. Whether it's writing books or being booked for workshops, or they do online workshops, or they sell products, or they work for the entertainment industry in movies, or they work for theaters, or it's it's not just wearing a costume and being on a, getting photographed or being on a camera. There's a lot more that tends to go into it than that. And I think that's sometimes where the disconnect and the frustration comes is they're like, well, I'm making all the TikToks and I don't have 100,000 followers. Why is this? Well, there's more to it than making TikToks and having thousands of followers. You'll see it periodically there's like cosplay marketing and business Facebooks, and you'll see people post every once in a while and they'll be like, I have 100,000 followers, but cons aren't inviting me to guest. Why? Well, there's more to it than just how many followers you have on a platform. And so that's kind of, we're doing what we're calling the Great Guesting Experiment right now that will air at the end of the season. And we're going to talk about, like, we actually tried applying for conventions this year. Like, we made our formal website. We actually tried applying for conventions, and we're going to talk about what that process actually looked like. How many did we actually get from submitting and not knowing anyone that's at the convention? Like, and talking about how this process works a little bit, especially since we are our numbers and our, community being aware of us is more in that nice middle ground. We're not like really big or anything. So like, how does this work for your, everyday Joe cosplayer that, can do XYZ? Why is it that we get picked up? And we're going to try to talk about all of that. So.
Cool. Well, as a data nerd, I'm very excited to
Yes.
to learn.
I have a spreadsheet. There's data.
Yay!
Yay! There's data. I've kept track of like whether or not we know someone at the convention, or if we were, recommended by someone, if they came to us, what did they book us for? Because I think people are going to actually find that to be very interesting. It went the way we figured it would, so they'll have to find out. But we are getting booked for what we think we're getting booked for, which is awesome because it's what we want to get booked for. But like, did we get paid? Did we have to turn any gigs down because they didn't want to pay us? Because artists should be paid. So did we turn anybody down because they didn't pay us? What did they ask us to do? And we're not going to give specifics about any specific convention because that should stay private. Like, how conventions conduct business should stay private for the convention. But we'll talk about how many we submitted to, how many we actually heard back from, how many we booked. Did we change anything between like when we first started doing it and after that? And just kind of let people know what the process looked like. So, and whether or not it was worth sitting there making the massive convention spreadsheet that I have and actually applying to all of these conventions. We're going to find out in December.
There you go.
Have the data.
Well, again, as a data nerd, I think it's worth it, but
I mean, it's been a really interesting experiment. To see how people respond, what people offer, what they don't. It's been interesting. So
again, I will shiver in anticipation for that episode.
Right? Yes, you'll get all the data.
Excellent.
We'll give you all the numbers.
There we go. Cool. Anything you'd like to geek out about that is not cosplay related?
Not cosplay related. There's not a lot that I don't do that isn't cosplay related at this point. I mean, so Reggie Khan's a great example. We all geeked out over therapy related things.
Yes, yeah.
That is fun, when you get put into a room of therapists and you're able to kind of geek out over like the importance of play in adulthood, and you're throwing all these like theories and things around, and anybody else sitting out there would be like, what the heck are they talking about? But yeah, I mean, most of things that I do are in the nerd fandom realm, so to speak. Not really anything that I think would be like too off the wall.
I just, as a fan of fandom, I always like to let people geek out about, and I like the point you make about therapists and academics. We don't consider ourselves fandoms, but
It
having
is.
been to a lot of cons, yeah.
It's totally a fandom. Like, if you're into your profession and you're not like, I'm doing this for my paycheck, if you're like really into your profession, it is 100% a fandom. Like, if you meet other people who are also really into their profession, it's the same response.
Mhm.
Like, you have the same level of energy, that group flow happens, and you all just start going about whatever it is that you want to talk about. I am doing a panel in Minnesota with a physical therapist
Mm.
about movement and cosplay at a convention, because we met previous years at same convention and went, "You're a PT, you're an OT, we need to combine," and so we
Mhm.
geek out about both.
By our therapy powers combined.
I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for the therapy powers and the cosplay to combine. We
Right.
do it frequently, so it does happen.
Where can folks find you online?
So we are under Lavi Cosplay pretty much anywhere. Website, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're all Lavi Cosplay. The podcast is Shenanigans Cosplayers Say, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Um, we have a link tree on our Instagram that goes to all of these related places. So that is where we are found.
Well, thank you very much, Elle. I always appreciate chatting with you. Glad we could do this.
Yes.
And thank you all out there in the interwebs for listening or watching.